You ever have one of those moments where everything you thought was true is actually wrong and you should have had a different belief kind of your entire life? That's exactly what this video is, but it's one that took me 30 years to figure out. For 30 years, I had this belief that I had to be strong, that the best thing that a human could be is strong. And I'm not just talking about physically, I'm talking about mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually strong. And I've realized recently over the last couple of years is that that belief was actually setting me up to kind of play the game wrong. If we look at life like it is a game and it's our job to just kind of learn about the game and advance different levels of the game, that belief that I had to be strong and that was the best thing I could be, that was actually setting me up to play the game wrong. So what I'm hoping to do in this video is share with you what I've learned to be kind of a cheat code if we consider life in general to be this big game that we're playing at this cosmic spiritual level. And when I think back to it, like that belief that I had to be strong was influencing all of my actions to some extent or another. So everything that I did was around trying to be so strong or prepare myself to be so strong that I could stand whatever life was going to bring at me, essentially be my own force of nature and like have life and people bend to my will. And so a lot of the things that I did would line up with that. I wanted to be strong, so I would just lift weights. I wasn't worried about mobility and flexibility as I got older. Or I would prepare myself mentally by doing hard things and things that I thought would be kind of difficult for me to pull off. And that could have been something like a long physical endeavor or like starting a business and actually growing that to be significant. Like that's what I mean in terms of like doing hard things, all because I thought that being strong was the most important thing that I could be in order to win this game of life. I would also look at this in like learning how to do stuff. So if there was somebody that was teaching something, I was all in, going like, all right, teach me everything you got because it's going to make me more prepared. It's going to make me stronger. And whatever life throws at me, I'm going to be able to resist it. Because if life's trying to give me something that I don't want, the best thing I can do is be strong so I can resist it and kind of turn into this outcome that I really want. So that was my belief system from like 15, 16, 17 years old up until like the last couple of years. And I'm 47 now. And all of this did, some of it, it's like, it kind of worked out. But what I realize is that there are limitations to strength. We can't resist the natural forces that come. We can't resist that life's going to do whatever life's going to do, and it's going to do it on life's terms. It's going to be at this cosmic level. And there was a lot of ego tied in that belief that I could be strong enough to like exert my will over life. And, you know, it's something you look back on with age and maybe the collection of what I'd call wisdom, looking back on it and how egotistical that is to think that any of us can be strong enough to like get through something. We don't need to be strong to get through anything. You see that a lot with people that are going through illnesses and people talk about like, hey, how strong they are. I understand why people would say that, but I think it's actually something else. And this is like the belief shift that switches. Because there is no such thing as strong enough to exert your will over life's force. There just isn't. You can look at the smartest person in the world and they're still going to have life circumstances that pop up. You can look at the strongest person in the world. They're still going to have life circumstances that pop up. You could look at we could measure like the most emotionally intelligent person on the planet. Guess what? Life's still going to pop up. There's nothing that you can do to prepare yourself to be strong enough to resist and have its force come to you. So the question then is, you know, what's better than being strong? If that first belief was that the best thing a human can be is strong, what's the reverse? What's the thing that shifted all of this? It was the realization that being flexible is way more important than figuring out how to be strong. Look at this, like if we look at it in nature, this is the difference between a big tall tree that's got a deep root system but like really, really strong. That can still get blown over in a hurricane. But if we look at grass, grass is not going to get blown over because its leaves are just more flexible than the trunk of a tree. And so it is much better in my life experience to be able to be flexible. It's much more important to be able to be flexible than it is to be strong because, again, you can't resist life. But the question becomes, how? Like that might sound good, right? That if you're flexible, then it doesn't matter if there are perceived good events in your life or perceived bad events in your life. You can be worth $100 million or you can be worth $50,000 and still kind of feel the same about it. That might sound good. That might sound aspirational. I certainly think it sounds aspirational. So the question really becomes, how do you get there? How do you get to this place where you're okay whether your relationships are amazing and you feel connected and in love, or you feel kind of alone? How do you get to that spot? Well, first is to realize that the ultimate strength to anything is in surrender. And it's surrender to life's circumstance. And to realize that like all this stuff that's going on is happening cosmically for you and your experience and your own growth. If things aren't going right in life right now, it's a fun exercise to think of how many things had to happen exactly like they did in order for you to even be here on Earth, here watching this video, here breathing, whatever it is. I like to think about this. If my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather hadn't gone to get water someplace at some particular day, and my wife's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother hadn't gone to the exact same place to get water, that day they never would have met. And if they never would have met in that particular moment in time in a very long history, then neither of us would exist, and neither would our kids. I wouldn't even have anything to say right now because I wouldn't exist. So all that cosmic stuff happens, all those things that went down on Earth to make you you. And here we are complaining because we don't like how things are going. That's one way that we can look at it. But practically speaking, how is it that there's ultimate strength in surrender? How is it that you can feel equally okay about being worth $100 million or $50,000? And I think that there's an answer to this in a Buddhist philosophy, and it's called the law of hidden potential. And essentially what it means is that there are no good events or bad events inherently that happen in our lives. We choose to assign meaning to the events as either good or bad, and we usually do this pretty quick. We see something happening and we're pretty good judges of saying that's good or that's bad. But what we don't stop to do is think that that's just our perception of what happens. So an example for me of this is that, there were a number of women that I dated seriously before my wife. And for whatever reason, those relationships ended, right? Sometimes I would end them. Sometimes the woman would end them with me. And each time I felt like it was terrible. Like, you'd sit in your apartment for a couple days and just eat top ramen, contemplating your life choices. And I thought this was catastrophic. And I thought all of them were terrible, like the worst thing that ever happened to me. But then I would have never met my wife had none of those events occurred. So while I looked at them as bad events in the time, I perceived them that way, they turned out to be very good events for what was happening to me in the long term. So that's a good example of this law of hidden potential that the Buddhists talk about. And so for you watching this, and for all of us, is the recognition that in surrender, perceived good things or perceived bad things could happen, but we don't know the whole story yet. That's one of the beauties of just letting life unfold, in my experience, is not being so quick to judge what's exactly in your field of view as being good or bad. Because right now, you just don't know. Think of all those girls that ended up with relationships that weren't with me anymore and my perception of that. It turned out really well. turned out really well for me, but it wouldn't have otherwise. And it certainly wouldn't have if I wasn't able to see through that and get to the next thing. So overall, the strength has nothing to do with being able to resist life's force. Like, that's just never going to happen. That was a bad perception that I had, and a really egotistical one that I thought for 30 years, that I could be strong enough to like exert my will over where my life was going. Realizing though that all of the best things that happened in my life, that with distance and space, they truly turned out to be good. These weren't ones that were judged like right in the moment. These are ones that are judged years later, in some cases decades later. All the best ones happened when I surrendered. When I surrendered trying to like have everything together. When I surrendered like all these things that I built up as strengths. When I surrendered to just going like, all right, this is what we're doing right now. This is what I'm doing right now. That, when I look back at it, I can trace it. Every single event that turned out to be great in the long term happened through surrender, which is what I'll call flexibility. So that's why that fundamental belief shift became so important, is that if you think strength is something that is you could ever build up to a level that would be stronger than life or the universe or God or whatever you want the force to be called, you got to realize that's an impossible task. It's better to just go with the flow and revel in the mystery. Stop trying to figure it out and just watch what happens with life. There's an experiment that goes along with this. And I think Michael Singer wrote about it. If you haven't looked up Michael Singer books, look it up. And I think this one's called the Surrender Experiment. And it's just what your life looks like when you surrender. When you're just like, all right, I'm just going to go with the flow. Very similar to what the Tao Te Ching talks about with being like water. If you've heard that in spiritual circles before, you'll hear somebody go like, be like water. And you know, that sounds good. And the whole time you're sitting there going like, what does that actually mean? Like, how do I do that? Well, water just flows down a hill into the ocean. It's looking for the easiest path to let gravity do its job. It flows, it's indifferent. It knows it's going to a final destination and it just flows that way. And so what I think that's really meaning when it comes to like be like water is kind of like what Michael Singer was saying, which is the same thing Lao Tzu was saying in the Tao. Just go with the flow and be flexible with what happens, because you have no idea if what's happening right now is good or bad. And only the future is going to tell you the answer to that.